It is time. It is here. Fight Island, baby. Episode 58 of The Next Best Bet. And we're going to talk about Fight Island in the UFC. We're going to talk about some PGA Tour and some NASCAR coming up this weekend. But we have a ton of coronavirus sports news to talk about first. This is The Next Best Bet. I'm Jake Higgins with Brett Levy, as always. We don't have a hindsight Higgins for you because, Brett, you and I didn't post any picks really to go over. So let's just hop right into Beginner's Boulevard because we're going to take it back to the basics with an over-under.
Yeah, that's my bad. I did win some money. Bayheim's Army, baby. The cover and the money line, so that was nice. And yeah, I'm excited to watch them play again this weekend.
I did not get money on Bayheim's Army in time. I wanted to, but all of a sudden I looked down at my phone. It's one of the disadvantages of living on the West Coast. Middle of the workday, all of a sudden you look down, you see the ESPN apps say, Bayheim's Army is tipping off now. Watch here. And you're just like, I meant to get that pick in already. But so I missed it. But you know what? Bayheim's Army still won. So I have another chance coming up this weekend. And we're going to talk about some of that TBT later in the program. But an over-under, this is a very basic term. It can be used for wins, runs in terms of baseball, points. You could talk about totals. It can be teams. But it's just a certain number, and you're going to guess whether it's going to be over or under if that number is going to be done in the game. It could be how many home runs are hit in a game. It can be based off the score. It could be based off how many three-pointers are made in a game. Over-unders really cover a rather wide part of betting, Brett.
Yeah, and it's like you said, runs scored, win totals. We're gonna have an example of a win total coming up with the Braves here in a little bit, but yeah, it's a good term to know, and it's a good fun way to bet.
Well, let's jump into that MLB right now because we have heard a lot about the players that are testing positive almost daily now. Sean Doolittle had a interview with the press on Sunday after a practice where he said he got tested that day when he got to the facility, as they always do. But even after practice and by the time he was talking to the press, he still hadn't received the test results from his Friday coronavirus test. So I mean, it's great that you're testing players daily, but it's a bit redundant if you're not turning over those results as fast as you need to, in a sense.
Yeah, that's a good point. What's the point of testing if you're not gonna get the results? So, um, that's a very fair point, Higgins, and yeah, I mean, I look at this and I think about the Angels example for example for example. Great job there, Brett. But I think of the Angels and I think, Julio Teheran, he's tested positive or he's missing from camp, one of the two. I get it all jumbled up how it's being reported. Each team's different, each case is different. It's kind of difficult to follow, but he's been missing from camp, and you look at Mike Trout, and he's one of the players who's up in the air right now. In Atlanta, Freddie Freeman has his wife shared the troubles he's been having battling the disease, and obviously Nick Markakis has since sat out, which leads me to a question for you, Higgins. The Braves
Okay.
were one of the favorites in the NL East.
The Braves were the team that before the coronavirus I had my money on for an over-under in franchise wins at 90.5.
Yeah, and Freddie Freeman's an important piece with him, and first and foremost, we hope he gets healthy. But
Absolutely.
secondly, this is a sports betting and fantasy sports podcast, so we're going to talk about that aspect too. And him and Nick Markakis were going to be everyday players for the Braves. Freddie Freeman, obviously an impact bat in that lineup. That under 33 and a half, I'm kind of leaning that way now.
Well, if you just think of it in terms of percentages, 90.5 out of 162 games, it's just over 50%, just like 33.5 compared to 60 games. So it doesn't affect it overall when you look at it like that. But Atlanta, when the news of just playing the NL East and the AL East came out, Atlanta was one of those teams with a higher over under in terms of win totals. They were one of the teams that were expected to flourish in this shorter season setting in a way. So I think there's definitely going to be an impact. Talking about over unders, I've notorious throughout this show dealt with my struggles of ever being able to pick an under. I basically will bet an over or I won't pick it. So I don't know if I will touch this Braves over under now because I'm never confident to take an under, and I can't say I'm confident enough to pull the trigger on this over right now.
Yeah, I think this is going to impact the Braves. I mean, Markakis defensively, but offensively is a good player. Freeman's a great player for the Braves.
And then just
Obviously,
think of their impact in the clubhouse too.
right, and obviously they still have Albies and they still have their superstar in Acuna, but you know their pitching staff isn't as good as some other teams in their division, i.e., the Nationals and the Mets. Um, it's probably a little bit better than the Phillies. So maybe they're third in the division in that. And, they have one of the two best lineups. The Nationals probably have a better lineup now, though, when you take Freeman and Markakis out of there.
Freeman and Markakis, like you said, everyday players, very solid offense and defensive side of the ball, can contribute a lot. I look at them though because of the fact of they are veterans in Atlanta. It's kind of their team in a sense now. Freddie grew up through the organization being a rookie to now where he is with Atlanta. That's a big impact to lose Freddie Freeman just organizationally off of the field, let alone on the field and the metrics that he can bring. So the Braves, they start to worry me now, but Brett, honestly, I'm starting to just get worried about the season in general.
Oh,
It's
that's
not just the
easy.
MLB either though. I mean, we heard today on Wednesday the Ivy League, they're canceling fall sports.
Yeah, I would 100% agree. I am nervous about their return to sports, which is why I'm not going to bet the Braves over under today. But I just thought it was an interesting topic to talk about. And to your point, this Ivy League topic is also interesting. It is being reported by a few people, SI, Dana O'Neill, that they are trying to move some of the fall sports into the spring semester. So we'll
And
see what
I've heard a
happens.
little bit of whispers of that too before today.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens with that. That could be an interesting development as well. But I think generally speaking, the Ivy League's pretty smart, and maybe other leagues should take notice.
Well, Stanford, they're cutting 12 sports programs from their team. We saw the XFL and the popularity of football in the spring that it brought. So I wouldn't be surprised if fall sports getting moved to the spring would be a good idea and would still work out well if there is a vaccine and if there are proper precautions that are being able to be taken place by then. I mean, that's 9 months out. Who's to say where we are by then? Hopefully, the coronavirus is contained, but who's to say at this point? So, the Ivy League, I think this is very important because they were the first conference back in March to cancel their men's basketball conference tournament, and it ultimately led to other conferences very quickly following suit, and then the March Madness tournament being taken out. And we all know the Ivy League, they are known for being the smart group of kids. They are the smart schools that are very hard to get into and long running Harvard, Yale, Cornell, all those places. And if they are confident enough to be making this decision right now before even seeing professional sports take place in terms of team sports like the MLB, NBA, NHL, or NFL, I think the Ivy League is drastically concerned about what the outlook of the coronavirus could be this fall. And that's not just their athletic departments, it could very well be some of their academic notables talking as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know if it's going to be a trend, but it's definitely on my radar to start a trend for sure. And The Stanford thing's kind of interesting too because I looked at some of the sports that they were cutting. Do you know who their women's field hockey conference is with? Like, it
No.
makes so much sense to maybe not cut the program, but at least change conferences. They're playing like Monmouth out in New Jersey. I was
Lots of
shocked to
cross country
see.
plane flights.
Oh my God. I was like, yeah, there's no way you're covering this in your COVID budget season to go fly your women's field hockey game to New Jersey for a conference game.
I feel bad for those students. Hopefully, their scholarships still hold up and they're allowed to continue with their
Oh, yeah.
education through
I
this,
hope
though.
so too. I hope so too.
But while we see about this uncertainty with college athletics, let's jump into the NBA right now because teams are heading to the bubble, Brett, and we're starting to get some news of some cases popping up. Of Alvin Gentry is able to make the trek to Orlando. I saw he has cleared the necessary requirements to be able to do so. But there's been some interesting news coming with the NBA in this.
Yeah, a lot moving on. We finally got our first tweets from the bubble today. We saw like DeAndre Ayton carrying in his computer gaming desktop, and then we actually saw Josh Hart's completed setup. So we'll know what to expect on his like Call of Duty gaming. We've seen the setup. Um, Chris
During the
Chioza,
day, we can watch them play basketball. At night, we can watch their Twitch streams.
perfect. That's win-win.
It's all you need.
That's all you need. 24/7 content from the NBA. Chris Chioza shared a picture of his meal. Many are comparing it to airlines food. So, how about that airlines food?
I saw the WNBA also share a picture of their food, and they were not happy with their accommodations from the laundry facilities in the basement to I think someone found a worm on the ground in their room, and the food looked like something that you would get from a high school cafeteria in a sense. There's obviously going to be drawbacks in these scenarios. I mean, these are not meant for comfort, they are meant for safety. But the fact of if these players are still going to be safe is still up in the air because Adam Silver seems to being a little cautious and he's voicing concerns on whether positive cases might be able to pop the bubble.
Yeah, I mean, we've definitely seen the MLS also in Orlando having some issues. So, I would definitely be concerned. You and I just mentioned it in the last segment. We're not so confident baseball's going to get off the ground with all these positive tests. So why should I be so confident here? I don't know. I don't know. I guess I'm cautiously optimistic is how I would phrase it.
I wouldn't even put myself there. I'd say I'll believe it when I see it right now. But Brett, some good news. If you follow us on social media, by the way, at Next Best Bet on Instagram, at NBB Pod on Twitter, and the Next Best Bet Facebook page, we shared a video from last episode's recording of Brett and I having a conversation during our NFL segment about mental health. And Brett, you made a prediction that the NBA was probably working on something to help address the mental health issues that would arise with isolation like this in a bubble. And sure enough, 2 days later, we were right.
I was due after I got the NHL right, and then they took it away from me. So I was due.
But now I'm right on something because Jamal Crawford, I was saying, when we first heard of the NBA bubble scenario and everything, we were naming some potential guys that we thought should get signed to rosters. Jamal Crawford's going to the Nets, baby.
Yeah, I think we both had that one for sure, and he's 40 years old, so I'm sure there were a few other higher choices on lists for teams, but eventually, after enough guys test positive and J.R. Smith signs and other scorers sign off the bench, you turn to the veteran who gets it done, and he actually scored 50 in a game last season, if you could believe it.
Age is just a number, baby. He's scored more than the years he is old, so I would take him on my roster any
Oh,
day
he's a
right now.
walking bucket, walking bucket.
And he's as fresh as can be. Not that any of these players are going to be dinged up probably going into this scenario, but guy's got some fresh legs, and that's got to help for being 40 years old. But Brett, out of the leagues that are about to start up in July, I'd say what I am most confident in is the NHL. I mean, the MLB, the NBA, they got their own things going on, but they're going to be in the United States. The NHL, I think, could very potentially have the highest success rate or potential of having a successful finish to their season because both of their hub cities are going to be in Canada. They're going to be in Edmonton and Toronto. The NHLPA exec board, they voted for it. It's going to a full vote. Doesn't really seem like there's any expectations that it won't pass. To note, this is a return to play plus a 4-year CBA extension, so it's not just a return to play vote for the players either. It's going to be a full vote on all of that, but voting started today, it concludes Friday, and the NHL being in Canada, who seems to have a better control of the coronavirus, at least in the current state compared to America, makes me a little more, as you said, cautiously optimistic.
Yeah, I think that it's fair to have more faith with them leaving America. Canada seems to be doing a little bit better, but yeah, I'm still nervous about them. They've got more stuff to keep clean, more equipment, um, probably less facilities. Like, there's probably going to be more teams on the same ice. It's much harder to get 30 ice rinks in a city than 30 basketball courts, right? So, a lot more shared space, but I'm with you. I think they could definitely get it moving. And we'll see what happens. It's good that they signed their CBA extension because that was going to be looming. So if you're going to take all this time to negotiate, you might as well negotiate for the long term.
Absolutely, and you know what? For sports journalists, it breaks up the cycle a little bit because they just had the NFL CBA to try to dive into. They were going to have to dive into the NHL and the MLB one coming up this winter. So I'm sure there's a few people in sports business and sports business reporting that are kind of breathing a little easier with this going on right now instead of it being pushed off. But the NHL still does have their fair share of coronavirus cases. I mean, since June 8th, when these voluntary workouts have been going on, 23 of the 396 players have tested positive. Now, that's through a few thousand tests, though, so they've been testing regularly on players, kind of like what I was saying with baseball, and they tested Sean Doolittle on Friday, but he still didn't have his results on Sunday. The NHL is testing just as frequently. The league also has heard, though, that 12 other players have tested positive. So at least 12 players that haven't gone to these voluntary workouts yet have coronavirus. So 35 players in the NHL. That's a decently high number. Hopefully this can be worked out, but like you said, cautious optimism I think is the way you have to go when looking at any of these seasons starting at the end of July.
Yeah, I again, I wouldn't go placing too many futures, but you know who could place a few futures and probably wouldn't hurt him too much if the sportsbook was holding his money? Patty Mahomes.
You know what? If I was Patty Mahomes, I would probably buy an entire block and just have that for family because that man just signed a $500 million contract. I mean, granted, it's over 10 years, but it's a $500 million, Brett.
Good
That's
for
a
him.
B with a B.
Go get your money, Pat Mahomes. Go get your
Absolutely.
money.
Now, Brett, I did have a question for you with this NFL contract, though, because you worked in the NBA for a few different front offices and a few different teams throughout your time. NBA contracts are fully guaranteed. This has a $140 million guaranteed injury deal uh, or injury clause for Patrick Mahomes. It has some other things in there as well for him. What impact does a deal like this have in terms of the waves and ripple effect it will have for the rest of the league for years to come, in a sense?
I mean, think it'll be okay. He's the stir that straws the drink. That He's the straw that stirs the drink. There we go. And everyone knows it, so no one's gonna be upset that Pat Mahomes got paid. Usually it would only be someone would get upset if someone not really deserving got the money over someone that maybe is an impact player who has been the face of the franchise for a while. No, they did the right thing. They paid the right person. Uh, they probably set themselves up for a nice little dynasty run here. I'm not
That's
going to
what
be
Sammy
betting
Watkins
against
said.
Pat
He said
Mahomes
this
too
is the
soon.
That's what Sammy Watkins said. He said this is the run it back tour.
Yeah, I mean, I, over the next 5 years, do you think there's going to be a quarterback better than him?
No, but I think it's going to inevitably change the quarterback market like any time a quarterback gets the biggest deal does. I think Jerry
Oh,
Jones is probably kicking himself because he didn't sign Dak Prescott, or Dak Prescott is no longer going to be a Cowboy and those negotiations just stop altogether right now
oh,
because maybe that asking
Higgins.
price is bumped up.
I mean, no one's getting Pat Mahomes money, so Dak's not going to break it.
No one, I'm not saying that Dak's going to break it. I'm saying that Dak's $34.5 million a year might change a little bit though, or his specifications in his deal, like the injury clause of 140 million guaranteed, might be something that agents are starting to ask for quarterbacks, which will change things. I mean, we saw Tom Brady sign a 2-year, $50 million deal fully guaranteed. We saw Philip Rivers sign a 1-year deal in Indianapolis fully guaranteed. Drew Brees down with the Saints fully guaranteed. It seems like this guaranteed money is starting to become a bigger thing with these quarterbacks. And obviously, anytime someone sets the biggest contract, it sends ripple effects. And this one didn't just set it within the NFL. The MLB is known for having the highest contracts in terms of overall number because they don't have salary caps. And so Mike Trout with his 10-year, $430 million deal, he was the most highest paid athlete in North America. Now it's Patrick Mahomes, and he just unsat a baseball player for the first time in a long time. And of course, it comes from the son of a baseball player.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think Pat Mahomes is very deserving. I
Yes, he
also
is.
think it's easier to guarantee money to a quarterback because of the way the rules are structured now. So I get what your point is. I don't know if I'm as gun ho on it, just because I think quarterbacks, generally speaking, not always. Obviously, injuries happen, and Pat Mahomes missed some games last year, but quarterbacks have been
He probably
staying
won't be doing that
healthier.
QB dive at the 1 yard line anymore, at least for the next few
No,
seasons.
no, no. They're gonna be telling him hand it off.
But
Yeah,
Brett, I think
definitely
it's time to
hand it
talk
off.
about this weekend instead of the next 10 years because we've got a lot of TBT coming up because that championship game, that $1 million winner take all championship game, that happens on Tuesday. And they're only in the quarterfinals starting tomorrow, I believe. So there's some makeup time going on and some quick turnarounds. We're going to have some basketball to look forward to.
Yeah, like I said, I can't wait to watch Beheim's Army again, but some good games tomorrow. The Money Team versus the Herd, and I'm actually gonna find myself on the Money Team. And there was some line movement, Higgins, if you could believe it, in the TBT.
There's been some line movement. Now, it was at 6.5 when we were going through the rundown. What's it at now?
We now got TMT -7 and the Herd +7. So that one really big better, that shark or whatever, he came in, that big whale, and came in and moved that line. Maybe it was me.
The whale came in and got caught on the hook, and now there's no longer a hook. So if I were you, I'd take it. I mean, -7. Now you got the push or the win. 6.5. That's just a win or a loss. I don't know. I consider a push a win in a sense. You get your money back to bet another day. You don't get your winnings, but you get your money back to bet another day. So -7, to be fair, I like more than 6.5. But Brett, for the pillars that you and I never bet the same line, I'm gonna stay away from it for you.
What a guy. Thanks for looking out for me. And then there's another game tomorrow evening, night, or afternoon for the Jake Higgins crowd over in Portland, Oregon. Uh, Overseas Elite Armored Athletes. Overseas is -6.5. Armored Athletes obviously +6.5. That one I'm staying away from, but Overseas Elite obviously with some NBA talent on their roster with Jack and Joe Johnson, so that's pretty interesting.
Armored Armored Athletes, they played a good opening round though, so I think that should be a good matchup. That line's at 6.5 with the overseas elite favored. Brett, I do need to make a clarification. I said the quarterfinals they finish up tomorrow. It's actually the second round that finishes up on Thursday. Quarterfinals will be held on Friday and Saturday. The semifinals are going to be held on Sunday, and then there's that 1 day break on Monday before the championship game on Tuesday. So there's there's been a few upsets already. I mean, Boeheim's Army, you and I, we've admitted that we're going to be homers and that's who we're rooting for in this one. They don't have the worst quarterfinals matchup because they're facing number 22 Sideline Cancer, who defeated the 6th seed Challenge ALS in the opening round.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of tough to go on the seeding. I mean the Herd are the number 23 seed, and they're playing the Money team tomorrow, who are the 7 seed. So upsets happen in one and done tournaments for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, any given Sunday, as the movie says. So we will see how these go. Those are picks that we will definitely be giving out on our social media, so make sure to follow us there at MBB Pod on Twitter, at Next Best Bet on Instagram, and the Next Best Bet Facebook page. We will be giving out some the basketball tournament bets throughout the weekend, and then in next episode, we're gonna give a look at who we like for the Tuesday championship game because Brett, that Sunday semifinals game should be done by the time we record.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely looking forward to that, and it'll be fun to talk about on our next podcast.
In the meantime, though, we finally have Fight Island, baby. Brett, we got it. Yaz Island in Abu Dhabi. It is happening, and like we mentioned last episode, Gilbert Burns tested positive for the coronavirus. So instead, the main card title fight is going to be between Jorge Masvidal and Kamaru Usman. It is a welterweight fight, and I think this is going to be a fantastic one. These two, if you haven't seen the footage on social media already, they do not like each other. They have gotten in altercations backstage before, and they were very close to nearly running into each other in the hotel in Las Vegas, Brett, before flying to Abu Dhabi, actually. But I'm going to say I'm on Jorge Masvidal right now at +210. I think Masvidal, even with a week's notice, he's going to come in and win.
Uh, yeah, I mean, I from what I've been hearing, I've heard it could be a very chalky card, and Masvidal and Usman, obviously, you pointed out there's real disdain between the two of them, and maybe that's a good place to take an underdog.
Well, the reason I'm taking Masvidal is because him and Usman, they're similar in terms of fight styles. They're both strikers. Jorge Masvidal is also a wrestler, which will help him considering Usman was supposed to fight Gilbert Burns, who is a Brazilian Jiu Jitsu mastermind. This man is just fantastic in terms of grappling and Jiu Jitsu. So, Usman training for that style of a fight compared to the fight that he is going to see from Masvidal is starkly different. Usman might be bringing something out that Masvidal won't expect because of that, but I think Masvidal's wrestling will be able to counter that rather well. This is going to end up probably turning into a striker fight, though, a blow for blow, and whoever can get the successful takedown, I think has a good chance of winning, and I think Masvidal at plus 210 is some great odds to get him in terms of this fight.
Yeah, I mean, I think that all makes sense. I'm going to tell you about a fight I'm on really quick. I'm going to be on this Rose Namajunas Jessica Andrade fight. Namajunas is only 9-4 and Andrade is 20-7. But Namajunas has a 3 inch height advantage and a 3 inch reach advantage, and she's also the favorite. So with that, I'm gonna tail her.
And if you've listened to us before, Brett and I are big on the height reach advantage metrics that there are. Something to note about this fight between Andrade and Namajunas is the fact that they have fought before. They originally fought in the UFC 237 fight back in May 2019, where Andrade won by a second round TKO, and they were going to have a rematch in UFC 249 this past May, except for the fact that Namajunas pulled out of the fight due to personal reasons in April because of family members that had COVID-19 and the COVID-19, I believe. So this fight got rescheduled to now into UFC 251, and we'll see how it goes. I like the Namajunas pick, though. I think it's going to be an interesting fight. I think this entire card should be a good one, though.
Yeah, I think there will be lots of close fights. And to your point, Andrade won the last fight, but I I think in fighting, maybe it's a kind of like I was saying with your fight. There's a lot of disdain. There's maybe a little more emotion, and maybe sometimes you back the emotion.
There's history. There is
Yeah,
history, and
exactly.
whenever there's history, it makes you want to take a second look at those odds a little bit and maybe look into them a little bit more, see if it's money reasons that have set those lines where they are, or if it's actual skill reasons that has them where they are. And honestly, Brett, there's a third factor that is kind of playing a part in this with me, and it's the fact that this is Fight Island. And I have seen the fact that the octagon is set up on a beach outside. This is not going to be the run of the mill normal fight arena that they have. And I mean, we've seen how the fight at the UFC Apex facility that had a smaller arena by 5 feet in diameter, how that played a part in some of these fights. I'll be interested to see how the outdoor element also potentially plays a factor, because that could be interesting in itself.
Yeah, yeah. Do you think it's gonna come into play? I don't know if being outdoors would come into play.
Maybe the sun gets in someone's eyes. Maybe comes and maybe sand blows up into the arena and plays a factor. I think that the fact that it might be outside brings in a bunch of different elements and factors that you don't have to worry about in an indoor facility. So while it shouldn't play a major part, I think it very well could.
Okay, fair enough. I hope the sun doesn't get in anyone's eyes.
Hopefully the sun nor the sand. But Brett, real quick, we do have to talk about some NASCAR again because you and I have been leaning into this a little bit, and this is the Quaker State 400 at the Kentucky Speedway, and it's only had 9 NASCAR races at it, 3 of which have finished with a and been decided by less than 0.2 seconds, 2 tenths of a second.
Yeah, that is insane. I mean, those are some close races. Clearly.
We saw Talladega, the tight finish that one had, but at Pocono and at the Brickyard, there there were some racers running away with it. I mean, Denny Hamlin, he crashed in the wall, but he had a big lead in Indianapolis. Harvick and Hamlin in Pocono, they each won by a few lengths. I'd be interested to see if it's gonna fall and get close like this again. It's a 1.5 mile track. I was seeing that Ryan Blaney loves those. He is someone that crashed last week though, and they're also dealing with the fact that someone in their pit crew, he got pinned against a wall last week in a pit crash.
Yeah, that was pretty crazy. I mean, I'm sure you saw the video, but that was a pretty crazy video.
Yeah, that was not your average NASCAR crash at all. I mean, it was
No, that was
involving a man that was outside of a car.
yeah, that was pretty scary, pretty crazy video. But uh can we jump ship to the PGA because I'm so confused what is going on in the PGA, Higgins?
Yes, so for those that haven't already seen this, I informed Brett of the breaking PGA news that happened on Wednesday before we started recording. Apparently, the PGA Tour clarified their coronavirus protocol, which means that a player that has tested positive must quarantine for 10 days, but they are allowed to come back to work after those 10 days under the right conditions, even if they test positive. So if they're asymptomatic, which is the case for Nick Watney, Dylan Fratelli, and Denny McCarthy, who will be playing this week despite testing positive.
I'm I know it's not great for a podcast, but I'm just speechless. I have
it's
I have no idea what is going on in golf right now.
it is something that when I got the notification on my phone, I had to reread that single sentence about 5 times because I thought that I was missing a something that was negative in there and said that they couldn't participate for whatever
Yeah.
reason.
Well, you read it to me about 3 times, and then I read the whole press release because I was like, no, this just doesn't make sense. And they pretty much just kept repeating it. And I was like, they clearly know this makes no sense because it's written in here about 30 times.
Well, don't worry because, quote, out of an abundance of caution, Watney, Fratelli, and McCarthy, those three are going to play the first 2 rounds together. So they're not going to be intermixed into those other groups. But at the same time, is that really fair to those other groups? Is that a fair way to compete? If these people have a contagious virus, they're competing, but they're getting a different set of qualifications than the rest of people by playing with each other 2 days in a row.
uh, I'm Do groups not stay the same the first 2 days for everyone? I think they do.
It it depends, I believe. It depends course to course. It's based on the first 2 days. They switch around sometimes, though. But they were making sure that this one's out of an abundance of caution. So it makes
Yeah.
it sound like the other players they switch around going into round two.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know. Good luck with this one, golf. I mean, this seems how to shut down your league 101 right here. Invite people who are positive for COVID to come play.
And actually, to what I just said, I did just read back into the press release, and it says any player in this situation that's going forward, and any player that's in this situation going forward, they will play alone. So they are not going to be quarantining groups based off coronavirus throughout the entirety of the season. Next week, if this happens again, someone's just playing by themselves. If it's Patrick Reed, that dude's cheating, and I'd be suspect of whatever score he posts.
What is happening right now with golf, Higgins? I don't get it.
I don't either, but the only thing I do know that was slightly a positive from sports or from golf, Lee Westwood made a comment today saying that, or acknowledging that golf still has a long way to go in diversity, and my response to that is no duh, but at least you're acknowledging it.
I mean, I think Tiger Woods inspired a new generation of players, and hopefully Harold Varner can continue that trend. Of course, we'd like to see more diversity on the golf course, but also unfortunately, it's what is known as a country club sport. So it's one of those things that golf will have to continue to work on, and tennis, I'm sure, has to work on it as well. And we'll see what happens moving forward.
Well, Brett, you and I both find this entire PGA scenario absurd, so neither you or I have golf picks this week because I can't get past the fact that they're having players that
Oh
have
no, they're not
tested positive
finishing.
for
They have.
coronavirus.
I already know they have three positive tests. They're not finishing.
So it would just be a waste of money in those eyes. So
I,
we do not have money on the PGA Tour. I may put out some NASCAR picks as we get closer to Sunday, but I need to look more into this Kentucky Speedway in the next couple days and kind of see how I'm leaning Ryan Blaney. I want to see how he's doing and the status of his pit crew and the confidence they have going into this race despite uh, the loss of one man on their team. I did forget to mention one other lean that I am on, and that's in the UFC fight. I am leaning Max Holloway plus 175 over Alex Volkanovski. I'm probably going to take Holloway. I'm just not quite there yet. There's just something in my gut telling me to wait right now, and so I'm going to wait a little bit closer to Saturday to place that bet. But so I got one bet with Masvidal, you got Rose Namajunas, and we will see if we have some other picks in UFC or NASCAR. We are going to have some TBT picks on our social media, so like I said, follow us on there at NBB Pod on Twitter, at Next Best Bet on Instagram, and the Next Best Bet Facebook page. This has been episode 58. Brett, is there anything else you want to say before we head on out of here?
uh, go Namaunis and go TMT
And go Bayheim's Army.
and go. Oh well, shit. Let me redo that.
Namahunas, TMT, Bayheim's Army. You got our list, you got our picks. This has been episode 58 of The Next Best Bet. For Brett, I'm Jake. We'll talk to you after the weekend.